Dairy Farmers of Canada can end political careers. That group can end academic careers. I've seen it as an academic. They go after people. They've gone after me. They've gone after other people, and they will continue to do so because we're talking about billions and billions of dollars here. So there's no transparency in the system, and they own some media as well. So they control everything. They control the narrative, and people are led to believe that it's the best system in the world, and we shouldn't dare challenge the system. But the system has failed miserably.
Supply management and interprovincial trade barriers are two major obstacles to Canada's economic competitiveness. By limiting competition and keeping prices artificially high, these systems harms customers and prevent producers from fully realizing their potentials. As the cost of living continues to rise and the threat of tariff from the United States looms, Canadians are looking for solutions to ease their financial burden. It is therefore essential to challenge these policies, which remain highly taboo topics. Even Quebec Premier François Legault stated during his visit to Washington that negotiating supply management for dairy products was non-negotiable.
In Quebec, we are against changing the management of the offer. The reason why we have that is to protect our regions, all right? So we don't give any subsidy to milk producer. So the only thing we do is we manage the offer, and it's a way to protect small farms in all the regions. So for us, it's not negotiable.
To gain a better understanding of these issues, we are joined today by Sylvain Charlebois, a professor at Dalhousie University in Nova Scotia and an expert in food distribution and policy. With his expertise, he will shed light on the effects of supply management and interprovincial trade barriers, as well as the possible reforms needed to create a more competitive and beneficial economy for Canadians.
Over time, this system has been heavily politicized due to the fact that most of the quotas are located in central Canada. Half of dairy farms, and we'll stick to dairy, the SM5 is supply managed, so poultry and eggs. Those sectors are in a different place. They're much more competitive. So if we stick to dairy, you see that most of the half of the production is actually in the province of Quebec, which is really has become a political lightning rod because most parties, most governments who want to govern for a long time, they need Quebec. They need Quebec vote. And politically, this group, the dairy farmers in Quebec, La Fédération, they control everything. I mean, they absolutely have huge influences across the board. They spend over $9 to $10 per Canadian per year on marketing alone. So they have their logo on the Maple Leaf Hockey Club jersey, and they pay $20 million for that. Just to give you an idea of how much capacity they have so much money. So the supply management system is a misunderstood system, I think, for most Canadians, even politicians. Politicians don't understand the system at all. They're told to say to Canadians that this is a very important system, it works for everyone, but they don't understand it really, because when you sit down with a politician, they'll tell you it's very complicated. You have tariffs on imports, you have a crown corporation setting fair prices, and the mechanics behind that is unclear always. And finally, you have a quota system managed by provinces, which creates interprovincial trade barriers. It's been like that for more than 50 years.
Using a crisis that people fear to defend and promote interests which are against Quebec. In the same day, we see two things. Could we literally scrap supply management? It's bad for other Canadian economic interests. We should trade, say, okay, we forget supply management, so important for Quebec.
So the quota system is based on domestic demand. So in Quebec, for example, they'll actually set quotas based on what people consume there. And that's basically it. So once you actually start playing around with quotas and markets, it distorts the quota system. So they're not very keen in doing that unless they have prior approvals. They recognize that, say, Saputo has a plant in Quebec, and so because we in the Maritimes will eat cheese and dairy products that are made in Quebec, and so obviously some of that milk was actually produced in Quebec. So there's some arrangements that can be done, but generally speaking, there are restrictions. So, for example, if you want to start a creamery in the Atlantic, or you want to start a cheese making factory in the Atlantic, well, there's no quotas. You have to go to Quebec. So you understand that that's why it's so centralized, and it doesn't allow for innovation to prosper. And we saw what happened with Canadian Royal Milk, a Chinese company coming into Canada to produce a Canadian-made baby formula with Canadian milk, but the plant is owned by China. Why? Because we don't have the strategic thinking behind the dairy sector that allows for a better strategy when it comes to processing and value add and innovation. Supply management is all about farm gate. It's all about producing milk and butterfat, and that's it. So that's the problem that we have. There's a huge disconnect between farming and the rest of the chain. If you compare industrial milk, so the milk that processors buy from farmers, that's 3 times the price in Canada versus the US, so it's not competitive at all. And if you were to bring that price down to the US level, we'll lose most of our farms. They wouldn't make money. At retail, it's always difficult. I think the biggest disadvantage that Canadians do get from supply management is to see a declining sector, dairy, and there's less innovation in Canada. There is some innovation, but there's less innovation compared to the US, for example. There's no incentive to innovate at all. So you have less choice. You have fewer choice at the grocery store. If we are to abolish outright supply management, I don't see how we can keep our farms. So tomorrow morning we could basically drink American milk and consume American dairy products. I don't see how our sector can survive. So instead of setting a fair price for everyone, I've always believed that you need to create benchmarks to incentivize farmers to do better and invest and become more efficient. Like in Quebec, for example, you have 80 cows a farm. That's not very competitive. It's very costly to produce milk in Quebec, whereas in Alberta, you have 220 cows a farm. So it costs much less to produce milk and butterfat in Alberta compared to Quebec. Secondly, you create a new category to export dairy products. I think it was actually attempted back in 1995, unsuccessfully, but I think we're in a different place now. We could actually go to WTO and say, listen, we're willing to open up our market as long as we can export, and you actually get new investors into the sector to look at different products and different markets. It is not normal to see the Chinese come into Canada to process milk for China in Canada when Canadian farmers are saying, well, we can't ship to China because it's too far. Well, if they can do it here for themselves in China, why can't we do it ourselves? Fonterra in New Zealand, they had supply management, and they're actually exporting for more than $20 billion worth of dairy products to Asia every single year. So it's really a paradigm shift that needs to happen here, more so than anything, which actually could lead to a more competitive sector, and in the end, consumers would be better served.
And also with the threat of the tariff, now we are seeing province to reconsider the interprovincial trade market, that we have some barrier that stop our product to go from one province to another. We can't even export alcohol to another province.
Yeah, no, that's a big challenge. So that's why I've always said to politicians, if you really want an open market in Canada and eliminate barriers, you have to look at supply management. And the one way to do it very quickly is to harmonize the allocation process of quotas and eliminate provincial boards. But if you do that, you'll probably upset Quebec. There's no. I would see a huge shift from east to west of quotas, because if you allow, say, investors in Ontario to buy quotas from Quebec, that's probably what would happen, because there's way more money outside of Quebec, and it's a really consistent, predictable market overall. So
the only thing we do is we manage the offer, and it's a way to protect small farms in all the regions. So for us, it's not negotiable.
He knows that if he actually says otherwise, he will have a steep price to pay politically. Dairy Farmers of Canada can end political careers. That group can end academic careers. I've seen it as an academic. They go after people. They've gone after me. They've gone after other people, and they will continue to do so, because we're talking about billions and billions of dollars here. A lot is at stake, and Canadians don't know this, but these people are ruthless. They will go after people, and so right now I would say very comfortably, they own politicians, they own ag schools in Canada, they own academic leaders, they own crown corporations, including Farm Credit Canada and the Canadian Dairy Commission. When you talk to the Canadian Dairy Commission, you're not talking to a crown corporation owned by Canadians. You're talking to Dairy Farmers of Canada. They own, and that's why I've always been challenging the Crown Corporation to show us exactly how they calculate the fair price. My assumption is that they actually are using many farms out of Quebec to set a fair price to inflate a high prices, and that's why our prices are 3 times higher than in the U.S. If you actually use more farms from Alberta, guess what's going to happen to prices? They'll drop. So there's no transparency in the system, and they own some media as well. So they control everything. They control the narrative, and people are led to believe that it's the best system in the world, and we shouldn't dare challenge the system. But the system has failed miserably. We haven't protected any farms. We've lost 94% of all of our dairy farms since 1970, and in the U.S., they've lost 94% of all the dairy farms since 1970 without supply management. So my question to dairy farmers, why did we bother? Why did we bother to set up this policy when we're paying more for everything and we haven't saved anybody? So that's one thing. So, and then they say, well, they're subsidized in the U.S. Well, let's have that conversation. Because right now they're subsidized, but nobody's talking about that. They're compensated. We give them money for research, quote unquote. We give them money for all sorts of programs. Those are subsidies. Those are subsidies. So let's be honest with the Canadian people and tell them exactly what is going on here, instead of just supporting one narrative. But there's just no politicians. The only politician willing to do something now about supply management is Premier Danielle Smith in Alberta. She's the only one who understands the policy, but is also willing to have a conversation about the future of supply management.
Would you say that the main problem with this is coming from Quebec? UPA?
The UPA really controls everything, and absolutely, I think Toronto's negotiable, or Ontario's negotiable, because they have other things on the go right now. But Quebec, if you look at Quebec, 60% of its agriculture is supply managed. So it would be a big deal for Quebec to lose supply management. So they're going to fight until the end of time. And who actually protects the interests of farmers? It's the Union des producteurs agricoles. And that's why they've been, so every time the UPA or Farm Credit Canada is a sponsor of an event, they make sure I'm not invited. Ever. They don't invite people who would dare question supply management. There's no intellectual freedom in Quebec when it comes to supply management. Zero. And I wish you good luck to find one academic and record an interview with that one academic telling you that they have a problem with supply management in Quebec. Good luck. Based on our studies, of course, they don't disclose they don't test, they don't care about the quality of the product. Like Fonterra, after supply management, New Zealand started to care because they had customers and they were competing against other countries. So they started to test. They started to actually ask farmers to use certain feed additives and things like that, which actually changed the quality of butter. Butter in Canada is disgusting. It doesn't soften at room temperature because we're actually feeding cows with palm oil derivatives. Palm oil. That was Buttergate 3 years ago. We came out with this story. We tested butter, and the level of palmitic acid in butter in Canada is far higher than in the US. And people are complaining about butter in Canada, and farmers are saying, no, it's not us, it's the processors. They're doing something with the butter. And there's lots of that going on, lots of denials, and it's been working. But I do feel there's a wind of change right now. Dairy farmers themselves are as much as victims as Canadians. They're told how to think. And they say what they're told to say. They can't talk, and if they do talk, this one farmer 2 years ago dumped 30,000 liters of milk in Ontario. I don't know if you saw the video. This one guy, filmed himself dumping 30,000 liters of milk. And he was telling during his video that he was told by the board, the Dairy Farmers of Ontario, to dump that milk, Nobody has ever seen him ever again. We've gone through a few scandals. The milk dumping scandal, the Buttergate and there's been a few crises that they actually didn't do a good job managing. They just said, no, that's not true. But people buy butter. They see their butter is not good because they travel. They go to Europe. They go to the United States. And then they realize, my goodness, butter used to be like that in Canada, but it's not like that anymore. Mm-hmm. So people aren't stupid. They know that they're being sold propaganda.
Don't forget to go over calltheelection.ca. On this website, we have a petition to let the politician know that we want an election. You don't want a leadership race. We want an election right now. And so we have a separate web, calltheelection.ca. And also, I'm asking you if you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, to give a like and a comment. Thank you in advance.